3, 2, 1, and 0, and liftoff.
Hey everyone, it's Greg Lafferty, the Rocket Guy Real Estate Investment Network. Come check us out at therocketguy.com, where we have all kinds of neat assets for you to help you learn about real estate investing, because that's what we talk about around here, because that's what we love. We think it's cool. And so today I want to peel back a little topic. I get asked all the time, or someone tells me all the time, hey, Greg, I'd love to invest in real estate, but I don't want to deal with the tenants. How do you deal with the tenants? And one of those things is evictions. It's kind of a hot topic nowadays with things going on with this pandemic and conversations about should we even allow evictions. Oh, my goodness, what is that even about? So let's talk about that, how to avoid them. Why do they exist? When do we do them? Let's kind of peel that back a little bit. So I'm going to put on my serious hat the best I can today, because evictions are a serious topic. It's part of our business process. If we're going to invest in real estate, at some point we are probably going to need to perform an eviction. And so what does that look like? So let's dig into this a little bit. So why do evictions exist? That's interesting. Wouldn't it be nice if we didn't have to evict anyone? I would vote for that. Okay. So, we as Americans, we like to live in a civilized society, right? We could go back to the old Wild West days and, get on the street at high noon and duel each other out and things like that. But we like to live in a civil society, and we have laws that drive or model behavior. That's really what laws are for. So you have a speed limit. That's a law, right? And that tries to model or drive the behavior to drive within the speed limit. So the same thing with eviction laws or tenant landlord laws or other property laws or contract laws, things like that. They all drive and model behavior. So an eviction is the process that we have to go through that allows us to reclaim our property with grace and civility. Okay. Back in the old days, yes, we could change the locks or take the doors or turn off the utilities or the old, cliche of busting kneecaps or, whatever you want to do there. But that really doesn't help anybody. Right. So our legislators have written laws that kind of drive that behavior of how we go through a very civil process for reclaiming our property or really enforcing the contract. A lease is a contract. We, as a leaseor and a leasee, we have contracts between each other that establishes roles and responsibilities and how we are to behave and perform under that contract. So really, the courts are our places that we can dispute disagreements in the contract and also to enforce the terms of the contract, just like any other contract, right? So that it's called an eviction, but in the end, it's a small claims court typically, and it's to enforce the terms of the contract. So that's why they exist, to be able to model and to enforce civil behavior. So nice, kind, professional behavior. Otherwise, I don't know what would happen, right? We'd have to go back to the Wild West days and get in the middle of the street at high noon and say, get out. No, I'm not getting out. Boom. So sorry. But we just don't want to do that, right? So let's talk a little bit about how to avoid it, because most people say, I don't really want to evict anybody. Okay, well, that's fine. Probably the first step into helping you not have to tackle so many evictions. And I'll tell you, like, if you're going to play in this game, if you're going to invest in real estate, at some point, a tenant of yours will need to be evicted. Don't know who that is, don't know which property, don't know anything, right? But at some point, one of your tenants will need to be evicted. Now, if you have a property manager, hopefully they'll take care of that process or kind of walk you through that or kind of help you with that. But if you're actively managing this property, then of course you'll have to perform that function at some level. Okay. And we'll talk about that a little bit, but, how to avoid it. So the first thing is, hey, look, I once was told, how do you avoid, having stupid people? Well, don't hire stupid people. So, in your organization, but, how do you keep from getting a bunch of tenants evicted? Well, pre-screen them, right? Have some criteria. look at their financials, talk about their credit score, look at their job and their pay stubs and all that kind of stuff to make sure they have income. Probably the greatest reason, or the highest reason that tenants get evicted, is failure to pay rent. Okay. Most landlords, things kind of get a little bit loosey-goosey with some other things. Okay, don't park in the grass. Tenant parked in the grass. You're really going to evict them for that? Not so sure. But if they don't pay, that's going to be tough, right? So they need to kind of move along. So, most of the evictions are really for failure to pay rent, more so than, hey, the tenant parked in the grass, because they can correct that really easily, right? You can go to them and talk to them. It's like, please don't park in the grass. It says in the lease not to park in the grass. You're killing the grass. And they'll stop parking in the grass, maybe. Okay. But it's hard to correct a breach of contract when they're behind on their money. When people get into their finances, it's really tough, right? It's hard to catch up. So you want to make sure there's enough financial cushion for your tenants to be able to live in your place, right? So the last thing you want to do is to rent to someone as a kind gesture and then put them in a unit that they can't afford. Okay. You're trying to be nice to someone. Okay. In your mind, you're thinking, oh, I just want to give them a chance. They've lost their job, whatever. And they're struggling. I'm going to give them a place to live. No, all you're doing is setting them up for failure later, right? They might be able to make it for a little while, but in the end, they're just not gonna. Okay. They're not going to be able to make it. And so, I've had tenants over the years come up to me, or prospective tenants come up to me and say, hey, look, I have an insurance settlement and I have 6 months of the rent that I can pay in advance, but I have no job. I'm like, well, what happens at the end of 6 months? Right? I mean, I want this to be a long-term relationship. So are you going to be able to afford it? They can live there for 6 months, but by month 7, they're going to be kicked out with an eviction on their record. Like, that doesn't make sense. So, we want to go through the process and do our due diligence. We've talked about due diligence on the property before, our due diligence. So we want to make sure that we do due diligence on the tenants as well, right? We are providing them a very valuable asset to live in, right? To have and to hold and to occupy, to raise their family and have good memories and all that kind of stuff. All that's good. But in the end, we need to make sure they're the right fit for that property. And that's by performing credit checks and doing income verification and looking at criminal records and judicial records and other things to make sure they don't have any eviction histories or personal judgments that came from other landlords. So we want to make sure that is they have good records for that. We want to make sure that, we have a rule that you must have 3 times the rent in your take-home pay. So if you're looking at gross pay, maybe it's 4 times, but for take-home pay, you want it to be 3 times just to give them that financial cushion, because you're not their only bill. They have car payments and insurance and daycare and everything else they have to pay for. So that's going to come out of all their pay. And then, are they going to have enough money left over at the end of the day to pay the rent? So we want to make sure there's enough cushion, because what happens when the car's running down the road one day and blows a tire? Okay. Are they going to be able to afford that new tire and to pay their rent and their power bill and everything else? So there needs to be enough buffer in there. If you put the tenant in the wrong unit at the wrong price, it's going to be a disaster. Okay, it just is. So you have done a disservice to yourself, but more importantly, you've done a disservice to that tenant as well. So the other thing you want to do to help you avoid evictions is to make sure that you have a written lease, and to make sure you review it with the tenant prior to signing it and prior to them moving in, so that everyone understands the expectation. Okay. That could be, hey, don't park in the grass, or it could be, hey, no big loud musical parties. Okay. At 1 a.m. and driving your neighbors crazy, or no dogs. Okay. No pets, whatever those rules are. It sets out those expectations so that everyone understands what the rules are before you sign the lease, so that when they move in, you have a good agreement there. Okay. And it can't be verbal. It needs to be in writing. That's the only way that makes sense, because it's the only thing. You can't pull out language out of your mouth again and say, do you remember when we talked about this? No, it's a lot better if you hold up the lease and say, remember, paragraph 3 says, okay, so we all agreed on this, right? So let's make sure we're taking care of this. So it needs to be in writing. Okay. I'm no attorney. There are some laws out there that says, contracts for real estate need to be in writing, all those kind of things. But I'm just telling you, just from a business perspective, it needs to be in writing. You can talk to your attorneys about whether it has to be or not, but it certainly needs to be able to help you manage. So when do I evict? Okay. The funny thing about evictions is just like most things in real estate, the laws vary from state to state. So you need to kind of look at your laws, see what your local rules are, what the processes are. Some of the good resources out there, like your local apartment association or local property management association, or even some kind of real estate investment groups, those kind of things that get together. They might have some flow charts or process kind of steps that you can go through to kind of understand what this is. But generally, if you have uncorrected lease violations, okay, this is contract law enforcement. So if it's in the contract and says it's supposed to be done this way and it's not done this way, then there are some rules out there about breach and how long you're supposed to give them to correct it and all that kind of stuff. But in the end, that would be a reason for eviction. If it can't be corrected in a timely manner, as per the law or as per the lease contract, then that would be a time to evict. The other is a holdover, what we call a holdover tenancy. So they get to the end of the lease, or you give them notice within the terms of the contract that say, hey, it's time for you to be out in 30 days or 60 days or whatever that term is, and then they just don't leave, okay? They just don't leave. You're like, man, I really wanted that house for my mom to move back to when she was moving to the area, and the tenant's still there, and I can't get them out. So that would be called a holdover tenant. So you would want to consider eviction for that. The other is failure to pay. That's probably the biggest one. Failure to pay rent. So those are, and all those really should be governed inside the contract. So generally it's considered kind of that breach. Okay. And we're going to go enforce the terms of the lease. We're going to correct that breach, or we're going to enforce the terms of the contract. And that's what we're going to do. And that's why we're processing eviction. So I get asked all the time, like, well, Greg, don't they deserve a second chance? Like, why would you evict them? Okay, look, first of all, it's probably my fault for putting them in that unit. Okay, so I got to look in the mirror and go, okay, did I do my job up front and to help them with that? Is there some kind of speed bump that occurred that really got them, down the wrong side of the ditch? Okay, and that always happens. Loss of job, death in the family, sickness, something happens. A major car repair, something like that kind of gets them behind. Or, hey, look, I just decided to get a big old pit bull and bring him into the house and it says no pets, whatever. I'm not getting rid of my loving dog. Okay. So, but certainly you don't have to go to eviction. They can move, right? You could come to some kind of mutual agreement and say, hey, look, this is not really working out. I know you love your dog and we don't, want pets here in the apartment. So, you might just have to you're going to have to find another place to live. And they go, okay, cool. And I could go live with my mom for a little bit. Great. And you sign a little lease release form that says, hey, they're giving up their rights to the unit. You're releasing them from their obligation of the rent and the lease. And it's, hey, no blood, no foul. Everybody's good. Right. So that can happen. That could be a good second chance where everybody comes to a mutual agreement about how to handle it. And then you can pick up where you left off and go and turn over the unit. Now, there's cost to that, right? Every time you evict someone or every time you ask somebody to move or they just move in general, there's cost to turnover, right? One of my business partners and I were actually talking about that the other day, where she has a larger house and thinking about renting it out. I said, well, just be aware that, just to paint that thing on a turnover is going to be about $5,000 to $7,000. And so it's going to cost you just to paint it. So the turnover with carpet and everything else, could be a $10,000 turnover. So is it worth renting it out, or would you rather sell it? So we were just kind of thinking through that. So every time you evict someone, there is a cost to the landlord to get that turned over, not to mention the loss of the rent or whatever during the turnover process, or the loss of the rent that happened that caused the eviction to occur. So it's a very costly process to a landlord if the tenant starts to go bad, right? And that relationship starts to break down and you need to turn that over to a new relationship. So, the other thing I think about is, well, if we're given other chances or second chances, well, who deserves those? do I make a judgment call? Like, well, this person deserves a second chance or this person doesn't? Well, if we're supposed to define equal, and operate under equal treatment of the law, shouldn't it be like we have standard processes and go, hey, look, rent is due on the 1st, it's late by the 5th. By the 7th, I'm headed to the courthouse to file paperwork. I mean, that's the process, right? Everybody agrees to that. That's what's in the contract. That's how it works. That's equal treatment, right? So is that the way we're supposed to go? Or should we go, I don't think that person's going to make it, so we're going to evict them. But that person, maybe we should keep them in there a little bit longer. And they say they're going to pay me on Thursday. Like, which is it? It's a real good question. Takes a little bit of soul searching there. Which wins out, right? The heart to want to give second chances, but at the same time, the legality and the social pressure to give equal treatment under the law, right? So which is it? What do you want? But I will tell you that generally, here at least in North Carolina, the laws are written to give second chances already, right? You have to give notice that this process is going to occur. That gives them some extra time to correct the breach. You have to file in the court. That takes time to go through that process. Then they get served that you're going to go to court, and that takes another week. And then you go to court, and the judge rules in favor of one or the other. If it rules in favor of the landlord, then they have time for appeal to correct the breach or to appeal the justification of the action at all. And then the landlord has to go back to the court and file another writ, and it takes several days for the sheriff to show up and help you change the locks and those kind of things. So there is, there's a long time span in there. I say long, it could be 30 to 45 days or so from the time that you actually file the first claim to the time that the tenant is required to move. Well, there's a lot of time there to figure it out, right? Get extra assistance from social services organizations or church organizations, other things to help correct the payment or to mow the grass or whatever the breach is that the tenant is struggling with. So there's time in there. So in order to give equal treatment to all the parties and all the people, and to also allow for second chances, maybe it's just better if you set the right expectation and say, look, here's the deal. It's due on the 1st. It's late by the 5th. By the 6th or so, I'm headed to the courthouse. I do that for everybody, and just so you know what's going to happen. And but then then they have time to correct the breach, because at any point in the process you can stop it, right? You can stop it. And but I will tell you that generally, from a financial standpoint, a lot of Americans, they live real tight on their budget, and depending on how bad they get behind, my experience has shown really, I've only had a few over 25 years. I've only had a small select few of tenants to ever come back for over 30 days behind. And it's just the way it is. A lot of tenants and a lot of Americans, just in general, homeowners or tenants nonetheless, live a lot of paycheck to paycheck, right? They really do. And so if the alternator goes out in their car and it's extra $400 a month, and that's, wow, they didn't expect that, that blows their mind, right? And it blows my mind sometimes, right, when certain bills come in. So it's very, very hard to get caught up. But here again, that's why it's so important to pre-screen. So are the tenants, are they very responsible people? Can you tell from their credit score, like they value the ability to pay their bills, right? They value their home. They value and take very seriously their responsibilities around other contracts. So if you look at their credit score and you see their credit report, and there's all kinds of late bills to Verizon or their cable provider and other things like that, and they've had 3 cars repossessed and other things, that's an individual who just doesn't take personal responsibility for paying their bills, right? So probably not a good idea. But if someone takes good values the responsibility of paying their bills, and they have this kind of extra time during the process, there's no telling us what they could do to try to get caught up, right? They could go mow some grass. They could go to pick up some extra hours and shifts, or reach out to some family members, or go to some social organization and get some assistance. All that kind of thing could happen and kind of keep everything together and allow them to stay in the unit and move along. So, but sometimes, hey, look, to allow a tenant to move early before the eviction process even starts will allow them to even have a fresh start, right? And sometimes an eviction can be a fresh start for a tenant where they're just struggling. It's just stressful. They don't know how they're going to come out of the hole. And look, what you're doing is you're giving them a time to say, look, it's fine. Here's the deal. You just have to move. You can have a fresh start, and we're going to go about our separate ways. And so, so it can be a good thing for everybody. Okay. So things to consider as we go through this process, because, this is part of our professional work. Okay. This is our professional work. This is not the fun side. Okay. This is kind of, when you talk about the mini wheat cereal, you have the frosty side, you have the wheat side. Well, this is kind of that wheat side. Okay. It's not the frosty feel good side, but it is the wheat side, but we can handle ourselves in a very professional manner. Okay. Doesn't have to be mean. Okay. It shouldn't be mean. It should be very civil. This is the civil process. And usually what I tell my tenants is that, look, I'm not going to be mean. We're not going to do this in a very mean way. I have to file this because I have a responsibility to my organization and to my lenders and everyone else to run this in a very professional manner. So I have to file this. This is my recourse for you not paying your rent or for you breaching the lease. And it's, nothing mean. It's just, this is the process that the legislatures have defined that we're supposed to go through to correct this problem. Simple as that, right? Simple as that. There's no screaming, no yelling, fussing, throwing things. Okay. There's none of that. We just treat everybody with respect. We tell them what's going to happen. We walk them through the process and just kind of inform them as we go, and allow them the opportunity at any given time to say, hey, look, you're right. I need to leave. Here's the keys. Let me sign over my unit to you. We allow them to do that at every step of the process because, you know what, that's the quickest and easiest. It's very, very clean and it's done. So I get asked all the time, though, from things to consider, hey, do I need to get an attorney for this? And you know what? Every area is different, okay? And in fact, if you're buying rental property in a new area, so if you're going to even county to county, right? State laws are there, but every judge has their little process of what they want to do. There's certain counties around here where I have to go sit up on the witness stand and put my hand on the Bible, raise my hand, and I am the witness. Okay, and there are other places where you walk up and the plaintiff and the defendant sit at different tables and they take all the information from the tables. You don't have to take the stand. Okay, even in the same state. So if you go out to a different state, you probably ought to understand if how the landlord-tenant laws are structured. Are they very landlord-friendly? Are they very tenant-friendly? Or are they neutral? Okay. If someone sticks you for the rent, okay, and they stop paying your rent, is it going to take you 2 years to get them out? Or is it kind of more like a 30, 45-day process? Okay. So do you need an attorney? I don't know. But I would tell you, if this is your first time, I would recommend someone holding your hand and walking you through that process. Okay. And in some states, it would be very highly advised to get an attorney just to kind of walk you through, because the paperwork might be challenging. The process might be a little bit more cumbersome. So it might be worth the money to pay an attorney, kind of walk you through that. I would also say, generally, it's always a good idea. Don't lease to anyone without a good written lease. And you can get those leases from an attorney, maybe a broker. Some of the realtor associations, other things have standard leases, or maybe in a local apartment association or a local real estate investment group. Could have some good written leases that you can use. So they're out there, and feel free to pay an attorney to write one for you. It's a whole lot better to have a good lease that it's very, very clear. Everyone can understand it. It's better to pay for that up front, and then that can set up the lease for the rest of your career as a real estate investor. So the other thing is just to be civil, be kind, be professional. No need to be rude. No need to raise your voice. There's no need to be mean. You can treat others with respect, because that's what they deserve. They're people. They're human beings, right? We all have speed bumps in our lives, okay? We all have speed bumps. So there's times when I got into financial distress in my early 20s, and had to work through all that. So everyone has these problems, okay? So just be real. Just be a human and treat them like a human, okay? We can be kind to each other, but that doesn't mean you still can't enforce the terms of the contract, right? We as adults have agreed to behave this way in a written document, so we should have the ability to enforce that contract because it's a mutual agreement right? If we just decided, hey, look, you know what, we're not going to enforce any contracts here in this country anymore, okay? We're just not going to enforce them. Is that really real? Is that good, right? Are all contracts now invalid? All of them? Okay? Or are we just picking and choosing? Okay, so if we don't have the ability to enforce the contract, then the contract really doesn't have any teeth. Okay, so it might be valid, and for legal terms, some Harvard law student might go in here and, argue with me and everything. That's fine. Okay, but from a good old boy kind of saying, hey, look, if I can't enforce it in court, then really the contract doesn't make any sense. Okay, having a contract really doesn't make any sense. The other part that's really tough is that if you cannot evict someone, if you have no tools to be able to enforce that contract, what other organization is doing that, right? We are providing a product and a service, okay, for someone to live. If someone were to stop paying their power, the power company can come and without any legal recourse at all, turn off their power, okay? It's very possible, right? They can do that. So if you don't pay for your checkout at Walmart, right? That's a bad day. It's called shoplifting. It's illegal, right? If you don't pay for your meal and you get up and walk out, well, that's no good either. Okay, that's illegal. So if you don't pay for your place to stay, then we have a responsibility, and we've agreed to the contract to do that. So as a landlord, we need to be able to go in and to enforce that. And also really, that it's a contract. It goes both ways. So if for some reason the landlord has not been able to uphold their obligations, then a tenant should be able to take them to court too and say, look, it's according to the lease, you're supposed to do this and this and this, and you haven't done that either. And the judge could say, yes, you're right. So it's in both sides. It's in everybody's benefit, right? And just because you take them to an eviction hearing doesn't mean that they have to move, right? Doesn't mean that, right? Absolutely not. The court might find in their favor, or it might be just a simple breach, and the judge says, yes, you need to mow the grass. Boom, done, right? Go check back with me in 30 days. I don't know, right? But when I look at it and I sit there and I put on my philosophical hat, certainly this is an asset that we own. It's an asset that you own, right, as a real estate investor. So you certainly wouldn't let someone else borrow another asset of yours. Let's say, let's take, for example, your car or your phone, right? And just say, yeah, sure, here, take the keys. Don't pay me anything for it. In fact, I'll even put the gas in it, and I'll maintain it while you've got it. And I'm not sure when you're going to give it back, and I'll get it back to drive it again. It's my only car, but feel free to drive it around, and it's fine, right? No, it's not how we work here in the United States. It's not how we work as a society. So if we're going to allow someone to live in our asset, and we have agreement on how that's supposed to work, then certainly we should be able to enforce that, and they should be able to pay for that service, right? Otherwise, they should be making other arrangements, right? So that's just kind of how it goes. So things to consider. So is eviction an evil thing? No, it's just a legal process. It's just part of it. And I'll guarantee you that at some point, as a real estate investor, one of your properties will need to process an eviction for a tenant. It's just part of this business. Okay, it is. It's being a good steward, a good manager of our assets, a good manager of our resources. We need to take care of business, and this is just enforcing that contract, just part of it. So I'm glad we got to peel that back together and talk about this serious topic. And, certainly if you have any questions, comments, concerns, just fire that up. But thank you for joining us today at the Rocket Guy Real Estate Investment Network, therocketguy.com. Come on and check us out there and look at some of the other assets we have out there for you. Please like and subscribe and click the thumbs up and hit the bells and all those kind of things you're supposed to do on these kind of platforms to keep us up in your feed. And come join us next week. I hope you have a great day.